welcome you to our forum for seat number 3, Villages of Homestead, and on behalf of the Villages of Homestead Clubhouse, our board of directors and committee members, we'd like to welcome you to this particular forum. My name is Judy Waldman, as many of you know, and I was an elected official for almost 15 years. I served as vice mayor and councilwoman, so I know what it feels like to be in that seat. I truly do. I would like to introduce our committee. Dennis back here on the camera, Doc Justice over here on the other camera. My husband had to step out for a few minutes, but he's doing some photography for us. Ted Moscynski, our moderator, Evelyn Martin, our timekeeper, and Elizabeth Moscynski, who isn't here right now, but she did so much behind the scenes. She'll be here for our next debate, which will be October the 11th. So I do want to point out to you, and I've got some notes here, that there are 2 people running in the seat. There's not a primary. There will be a general election. The incumbent is Mr. Larry Roth. He was invited. He was sent 4 notices, but he chose not to respond. So we hope he's well, but he did not respond. But who did respond is my friend, William Bobby Ray. We all know him as Bobby, but his given name is William. And he is running in our seat, and it's my seat, and I feel very close and dear to it because I did serve for almost 15 years in this seat. So I'd like to thank you for your participation. I'd like to thank you for coming out in the middle of the day. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ted, and we'll get started.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Ray. Thank you for attending. A few rules. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do an introduction. I would like you to answer questions without using talking points, meaning stick to the question. Equal time, we'll tell you the time before each question. And if I want to expand on something, I'd like you to expand on something, I will do that as well. And that's pretty much all the rules since there's just you here and Mr. Roth is not here. So please open up with a 2-minute introduction of yourself, telling us why you were running, what's your platform and vision, and what makes you uniquely qualified for this particular seat.
Greetings and thank you, everybody. My name is Bobby Ray, and I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Homestead. My entire life has been here. I attended all the local schools, obviously, and I was a career police officer for 26 years with the city of Homestead. I got really involved about 4 years ago in politics, and I ran for the same seat 4 years ago on a platform related to density and development. Our city has grown very rapidly. The rapid, uncontrolled development, I think everybody sees it, they feel it. And 4 years ago, when I ran, there were issues in the eastern communities regarding traffic. My wife commutes every day. She's feeling it. I think everybody that heads north. We're in a very unique place. We are positioned at the bottom end of Miami-Dade County. Can't communicate, or you can't commute east, you can't commute west. Everybody goes north or south. Very few people go south. Most everybody goes north in the morning. Now our basic arteries are full, and we continue to try to push more into less. And we're at a point where our infrastructure is being affected, our essential services are being affected. Anybody that's missed their garbage pickup in the last year knows where we're at today. So with that, I'll defer to you and we'll begin.
Okay, thank you. You brought up about development. Would you support a building moratorium of residential housing? And if so, how long do you believe that moratorium should be in place?
I would support a temporary building moratorium for residential housing immediately after being elected. And I think that we need to get all the stakeholders to the table we need to evaluate our infrastructure, our streets, our ability to provide the essential services that a local government is supposed to provide. In the city of Homestead, we're very unique. We have an electric utility, we have sanitation, we have streets, we have a water company, all of whom, or all of which, are directly affected by everything that has grown in this city. And I think that we are starting to feel, if we haven't already felt it, that the essential services have been neglected over the years. And here we sit today with 3,000 more residential units in the pipeline, and we're struggling to get the garbage picked up. And I think that's a really big problem, and it's very telling for the other services that are provided to this city and our ability to provide them.
Okay. Part of this overdevelopment has added to, you've already mentioned water, water issues, trash issues, also medical treatment facilities. The hospital claims that they're at capacity now, and we still have more people coming in. They're actually over capacity. We also seem to be lacking in traffic control. What might you be able to do about any of those issues? Or what you try to do with any of those issues? I'm realizing or understanding that the city itself is not in control of much of our roads. And of course, we're not in control of what the medical facilities, as far as Baptist expanding, things like that.
Well, 4 years ago, when I originally ran, and we talk about traffic, we'll start with traffic control. There were political talking points of the day as we were looking at a development project right on Kingman. It came to be known as the Lennar 770 at Keysgate. There was a lot of discussion about how that one unit, or that one development, was going to affect the future. And there was talk of smart light technology, there was talk of the traffic lights that needed to be in place. 4 years later, that development is complete, and it's my understanding it's sold out, and we have 3,000 new units, either that have been approved or in some stage of development, and none of the promises have been kept. If we just stop where we're at, right now, stop, if we can, and we go back and we look at every bit of infrastructure and the essential services. That's all we can do today because we got a lot of catching up to do. As you mentioned, we are at capacity or beyond capacity with our wasteability, potentially with water. I've heard some, at least rumors, that the water treatment plant and the water drinking supply really needs a long look because of the development issues. We just need to stop, and we need to get all the stakeholders to the table and really reevaluate where we are today.
Okay. What do you think has contributed to the rapid development that has gone on, especially for residential housing? And do you believe that the developers, realtors, people who make a living off new homes and selling homes, building, selling homes, how much influence do you believe that they have, including campaign donations, and what can be done, if anything, to try to curb that?
Well, one of my main focuses would be to go to single district elections. Right now, to get elected, and historically over the last 2 decades, to get elected to a public office in Homestead, you have to have a war chest. You've got to have money. And it has become the inside trader's secret that the development community funds campaigns in a big way. My opponent right now has about $50,000 in his war chest, but going back to my first campaign, he had 50, so we're at $100,000 almost 80–90% of it comes from the development community, land use attorneys, that world. And they do not throw that kind of money into elections without promises for the future, and those promises have to be kept. So as we're approving variances, we're approving land swaps, the creative ways we push more into less. It benefits the developer, it ultimately benefits everybody in real estate because you got more to sell. The people who tend to get hurt are the people who live in the community, the people who rely on the services, the people who are here trying to get from point A to point B. It becomes far more difficult. So I think that with single district elections, it takes the need for so much money to get elected. If you just have your own home neighborhood voting for you, you can campaign to your area, your district, and you don't have to campaign to the city at large.
All right, thank you. You being a former police officer, I'm wondering if you might have some insight that could, I believe you would probably have some insight as to help improve our crime situation. Homestead is currently ranked number 2 in the state for property violent crimes. What do you believe contributes to that presently, and what can be done to mitigate crime in the future?
Well, as an elected official, what would be my responsibility is to ensure the proper funding to police and other services that we provide. Make sure that we provide all the equipment needed, funding, and manpower. But also, as an elected official, you have to be held accountable. You have to stand up and be accountable for the good and the bad, whatever it is. The average citizen, you and those of you in this room, you cannot effectively reach into the city and make any change. You can only hold me responsible. So it's my job to make everybody accountable at City Hall for the issues that we have. The Homestead City Council's main authority is funding. You fund the agency, and you make sure that everybody has the equipment, like I said, everything they need, but make sure also that the staff is in place and understand their mission. And then it's up to them to either carry out the mission or be accountable to the elected body for why the mission is not being properly handled.
Okay. Along those lines, you mentioned about citizen input. Recently, I'm trying to find my specific question, I'm sorry. Well, recently the Planning and Zoning Board was terminated. First, do you think that has an impact, or was that a good idea? And second, in addition to losing that, what more could be done to allow citizens to proactively engage in the city's future and city's planning?
Well, oddly enough, I believe that the last recommendation the council, the Planning and Zoning Board made had to do with Copart, what is now going to be in the Park of Commerce. I believe it's about 100 acres of non-working vehicles, trailers, and boats. Planning and Zoning Board recommended against approval for that project for that area. For whatever reason, the Planning and Zoning Board, after recommending against it and council overriding that board was disbanded. I personally believe that planning and zoning is very important. There needs to be public input, and having citizens at the table that have direct input to the elected body is very important. And when it was disbanded, it kind of speaks to transparency, and it speaks to who's lobbying, because Copart also funds a lot of campaigns, or has funded in the past the campaigns even of my opponent. And when they get approved or they get their way, it speaks to the fact that at least some on the elected body are listening to the lobbyists in the audience and those that are paid to influence rather than the citizen boards that are making, the people who actually have to live here and live in that junkyard.
Okay. Currently on the city council, you have a number of people who are directly involved in developer and realtor processes, meaning they, for lack of a better term, help increase their own inventory for sale. How much of an effect do you think that has, and is there something that the council or the city as a body could do to not necessarily restrict them, but how about recusing themselves when those types of votes come up? For example, if you were given $10,000 by a certain developer to get a zoning change, or you were paid $10,000 in a campaign to, and that same developer comes in front of the board, in front of the council, and would like to do a zoning change. Do you think it might be a good idea to have that particular councilman or council persons recuse themselves from a vote?
Well, that's a very tough question, and I think the practical answer is if you tried to do that, there would be nobody there to vote. That's the grim reality of where we are today. And it goes back to why we need to get to district elections. We need to take that whole money aspect out of the equation if possible, or at least as much as possible. And get back to local people who reside in this community making those decisions. But for today, the best we can do is hopefully ask our community to elect their representatives based upon people who really care about the community, people who are not beholden to the special interest. That's really where it's at right now. And then beyond that, I would agree with you that, and I see it, I feel it, and I would agree with you that it's not fair if I'm elected and there's a million tentacles to one, two, or a handful of large tract developers, and my choice is to make the right decision or pay homage to the people who are funding my campaign. I think it's a clear conflict, but it's pretty complex in how we can fix the problem.
Okay, thank you. That's a good answer, or to a complicated question. Now, employment opportunities in Homestead are few and are often lower paying jobs without or very little benefits. So most people within live in the city, go to work in Miami or nearer to Miami. Homestead residents have been promised local high-paying industrial tech jobs for years, with little to no positive impact on the number of quality jobs that include both benefits and higher wages. What do you think could be done to finally bring high-paying jobs to Homestead? Or, alternatively, is that a pursuit that the city should be spending money on trying to recruit companies to come in there?
Well, I think we go back to the last question regarding Copart and the influence Copart has had. There's 100 acres now in the Park of Commerce that, in my opinion, could have been much better used for solid middle-class working professionals or industries, light industry that can support that versus 100-acre junkyard. We have very little developable land left to recruit those type of businesses to our community. We're almost at the end, and unfortunately, we're almost there. So with what little we have left, we have to maximize our potential. We really need to look at what we're bringing here, and we have to understand that the northbound commute is critical now. We're beyond critical mass down here, and it's hard. the average person who moves to Homestead and has a vision doesn't necessarily understand that your morning commute to Kendall, Gables, or Brickell adds 4 hours to your day, minimum 4 hours. So if you're trying to have a family life and you're stuck, when I was going back to the 80s and the 90s when I was a young policeman, to make 9 o'clock court, you ran into traffic halfway up 874. Right now, my wife before 6 o'clock is stuck at Biscayne going northbound and stop and go traffic all the way to the Gables. And I think that everybody's feeling that. So again, we are here and we can't undo what's already done, but we certainly don't want to continue the progression.
Do you have any suggestions or recommendations that you've considered that could alleviate that traffic?
Well, I know that there are some ideas being floated, that are being floated, but honestly, it's going to be difficult because I've heard, of western corridors being used. There's a lot of ideas, I would say, on the table. So many people into an area that generally are the greatest percentage of them are commuting north. So the arteries, if you think of it like this, we build another 8-lane superhighway up the west side, which is something I heard the other day, along East Glade to go up and meet into 836 or something, which I did hear about it. It doesn't matter. All we're doing is creating new lanes of traffic going to the same place. Ultimately, we're creating a parking lot. And we see it right now. So the idea of continuing this very high density development in Deep South Dade, in my opinion, we really need to think long and hard about all the consequences environmentally, and how you still going to get there. If everybody or the great majority of people are employed downtown, or they're employed in the Gables or even around those areas, the morning commute is still the morning commute, no matter how many lanes of traffic you have going to one location.
Okay. Main Street, downtown. I think this will be my final question for you. Do you think Main Street downtown is healthy and successful now? And anticipating a negative question from you, a negative answer from you on that, how would you try to improve Main Street and make it a centerpiece for the city? And make it more accessible to not only people on the east side, but people on the west side who, as you probably know, very rarely go downtown.
I hear a lot about it. And like I said, I keep going back to 4 years ago when I ran. I think the issue of the day was Homestead Station. And we debated it back and forth, and I had an opinion about it then, and my opinion hasn't changed much today. In November of 1975, I went to work in downtown Homestead as a junior in high school. And we were redeveloping downtown Chrome at that. It all came up in the late 70s, and it was when they put the famous flowers on Chrome and changed the parking, and we were going to turn it into Los Olas Boulevard. And from 1975 through my entire adult life, we have been continually working on Main Street. In 1990 something, I was a sergeant with 1994, 95. I was a sergeant with Homestead Police. We had a new city manager, John Asmar, was in my police car touring with me one night, and he said, I think we can make this a really special place to get people east of the highway. Now, we've grown a whole city since then, and we have continually, over years, tried to make Main Street the centerpiece of the city. It's a great idea, it's a great thought. I have no issue continuing, but being the old guy that I am at this point, I also understand that we may want to completely rethink that theory, since the bulk of our city has expanded east, and what you would now consider the centerpiece of Homestead is probably not that area. And that's the grim reality. No one else wants to say it out loud, but that's what I believe.
Okay. I'm going to review real quick. We covered a lot of ground here. If elected, what three steps would you take to put our city on a firmer financial footing? Bringing everything into play. Administrative costs, costs for the police force, our contribution to the police retirement fund, pension fund, and the projects that are already in line. For example, the old city hall property, what's going to be done with that? That's prime property, and it just, we hear a lot of things about it, but we don't really see anything being done. So along those lines, what would you do to put the city on a firmer financial footing? How do you think, if we were on a better financial footing, that would help us accomplish some of those goals?
Well, I would say this. The city really is an interesting, unique city, because what we would typically, those of us who kind of grew up in the city, understand is the enterprise. There's an enterprise side of the city, which is the electric, water, sewer, all of the what we used to call the profit centers. I've been out of that game for a while, but I would say this: there needs to be a real evaluation. We need to sit down and think about where we are with the electric company, with the water company, what's viable, what's not, and start there. Because one thing, going back to our toughest days financially, which were generally after Hurricane Andrew in the 90s, we relied on the enterprise to keep this city alive. We teetered on bankruptcy more than a couple times. I was there in the days when we literally were given a time certain to a particular Monday to move police officers off of the payroll, which we successfully did without laying anybody off. We went to Miami-Dade Police, Miami Beach Police, Hialeah Police. We literally downsized the agency because we were teetering on bankruptcy. Fortunately, and I would say this is one of the positive notes of the development, is we are not there today. Where we may be in the future, I don't know, but I really believe that we need professionals, real professionals at City Hall, to start evaluating where we are with the enterprise funds, and then take a long look at what the taxpayers are funding. And that's just the way it needs to be. I don't have the answers today because I don't have access to all that data. But I would say this: there needs to be a complete accounting, and we really need to take a long look at where we are, where we're going, and what the future's going to bring. And it's really important to you and to those who live here that we do a good job. And it comes back to special interest. Comes a time when special interest has to disappear.
Okay, following up on your comments about the enterprise funding. As you know, recently, HPS has been having a lot of electrical outages. There seems to be one once or twice a week. That's all over social media. Many people are not happy. And of course, it doesn't help when the FPL people chime in and say, well, my electricity's fine. But we know that, I understand that is a revenue generating source for us. The other thing is, of course, garbage. As you mentioned earlier, garbage pickup is lacking right now. There's many reasons for it. I've heard what more could be done. We can't take away the homes that are already here, so what more can be done to improve the electrical service, or the option of possibly selling out that electrical service. But the concern, of course, is the impact on our own budget if we did that. And to improve garbage control or garbage pickup and bulk pickup now.
Well, I think that we have to look to history first. And if you look at those services you just mentioned, you'll find, and I have done some research on this as we've been on the campaign trail, that they've been neglected over decades. Go back 15 years and look at the electric generation budget, and you look at the staffing. Staffing's not much different today. With a city that has more than doubled in size, geographically speaking, it's much bigger, and population doesn't come close. So their customer base has grown exponentially, but the staffing hasn't. The infrastructure hasn't. For some reason, there's an issue there. So I think we got to go look at that, and we have to figure out how we got here. And I suspect that if you look at sanitation, public works, you're going to find the same thing. You're going to find that what we have not properly done as we have grown this city is we have not taken those important pieces, and before we kept saying yes, 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 we didn't stop and go, hold on, how are we being impacted? Where are we going to be 5 years from now? Where are we going to be 10 years from now? We haven't done that. So unfortunately, it's hard today, and I hear a lot of great ideas for the future, but the truth is, we can't repair a problem until we know how we got here. And we really need to take a long look at how it's gone over the last decade, 10 to 15 years. And again, it goes back to that moratorium. It goes back to stop the train, and let's figure out where we are today, how we got here, and let's at least catch up. We can't move forward until we catch up. And that's where we are, I think.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, anyone? Okay, why don't you go ahead and give us a closing statement, keep it to around a minute, and at the end, let us know how people can further look at your platform through social media or however you have it set up, and make contributions to your campaign.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm not a great public speaker, but I have a lot of experience here in the city. As a lifelong resident, I've done very careful, I shouldn't say I entirely, we. My wife and I run a kitchen table campaign. We are very cognizant that every opportunity we have to come to a forum or speak to someone, or if anybody, my phone number's everywhere, 786-535-9679. We look forward to talking to people. It's important that we just have common sense conversation. This is not all that complicated. This is very simple stuff. The problem that we have is, I believe, that a big portion of our city hall has been captured by special interest. And they have driven this boat for profit, and the people who have generally been left by the wayside are the residents. We just haven't done what we should have done along the way. And I think we've articulated that. I think you can see the voting records. You can see the fact that today, there's still 3,000 new residential units in the pipeline, and there's a ton of developer money flowing through, at least my opponent's campaign and more. And I think that speaks volumes for why it would be greatly appreciated if those who vote take a look at those of us who don't have PACs and aren't going to be able to do, PAC mailer hit pieces and all the fancy stuff. Guess who pays for that? comes right out of those same campaign treasury reports that are being loaded with cash from the same people who are building nonstop in this community. And at some point in time, we have to push back on that, and I think now's the time.
Okay, as an aside to that, as you notice, your opponent is not here today. How important do you believe it is that our elected representatives be available and come to forums like this and in order to meet the people that they're actually claiming to represent?
I can't speak for my opponent or why he's not here today. Only he can answer that question, and I would venture, or I would not speculate on that. But it is important for me to be here because I need and I want, and my wife and I appreciate every opportunity to speak to anybody we can talk to about this campaign. It's important to us. I have no other motives. I don't benefit in any way from being an elected official. I'm not in the sales business. I don't do any of that. I really care about the community I was born and raised in, and I don't like the direction we're going.
Okay. Finally, would you like to give us a way that people can contribute to your campaign?
www.votebobbyrea, VOBBYREA.com.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
I'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Ray, for coming today, showing your enthusiasm to change what's happening in today's world within our city. Mr. Ray does not have a primary. He has a general election, and that means that he will not be on the ballot coming up in October, but he will be on the ballot in November.
First Tuesday in November.
And we will be having another forum debate on October the 11th, I believe it is, October the 11th. And we welcome you to come to that. It's going to be a little more in-depth questioning. You did a fabulous job today, and we thank you so much for coming. Again, I'd like to thank our production crew for being here. We've been here all day. We're up half the night last night getting ready for this. It's our way of giving back to you, to the citizens of Homestead, to actually get to know up close and personal who our candidates are. So voting is important. If you don't think your vote is important, you are so wrong. You are so wrong. So with that being said, thank you, Mr. Ray.
Thank you.
And thank you to our team.